mixed. And I will end with some overall conclusions. Okay. Now, starting with the introduction, I should make a little correction to the title, because in fact, talking about survival of the fittest is relating to our biological evolution. However, the biological evolution of people is a small part of our total evolution, because of course our biggest and most fast and most specific evolution is our cultural evolution. And one thing that is very important in our cultural evolution is that evolution is actually quality driven. Because as a species, Homo sapiens sapiens, all our evolution is directed at improvement of our life, even thinking about improvement of the life of our children and grandchildren. So if the future looks threatening, there's one thing that you must not fear: quality will never die. It is endless. It'll always be important as long as there are humans. However, and that's what we'll be talking about today, the methods used to achieve it will change over time, of course. That is our cultural evolution. Now, before we talk about the future, I have what I would call two warnings, more or less. The first one is one coming from this Danish gentleman, Niels Bohr, the famous physicist, who is said to have come up as the first person with this quote: "Predicting is difficult, especially the future." And it means that whatever you predict, there's always a margin of error around it. And I would like to add one thing to that, and that is that no prediction has universal value. So I'll be talking about certain changes and trends that are occurring. None of these will have the same influence on all of you or on all your organizations. So it is very important that we all think very carefully about these trends, the opportunities of them, and how we can use them. And that may be different for each of you and for each organization. Nevertheless, I tried to come up with a couple of trends that I think will have a major impact on most organizations. Because of course, if you read literature, if you go to presentations, conferences, and so on, you obviously hear and read a very long list of all the things that might change or will change. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, I have taken 3 out of that I want to talk about a little more in detail. And the 3 trends that I will talk about are, well, pretty classical actually. Obviously, digitization and connectivity. When I use the word connectivity, it is what most people would call the Internet of Things. But I prefer connectivity because I think it is the way things are connected that is the most important. That we use the Internet as a technology is in addition to that and makes it possible, but it's the connectivity that is critical. I'll give a couple of examples of that later on. The second issue is a reduced product lifecycle time, which has serious impact on how we should look at quality. And the last one has to do with intelligent automation. The fact that machines and the systems around it are capable of doing more and more and contain more and more intelligence. And the first thing we'll do is look at the impact on quality management of these trends. Now, looking at the trends themselves and giving some more details about it, starting with the digitization and connectivity, there are, of course, 2 things that we all know about and hear about. That is big data on the one hand, and social media on the other hand, and obviously the interaction between the 2, because very often the social media generate the big data. Big data means that there's a large amount of data available. And that, of course, a large amount of interesting data can be generated. Now, I think even today, in many companies, there is not really a lack of data, but there is very often a lack of valuable information. So I think one of the issues of big data will be to turn all of that into valuable information. I think quality can play a major part in it. As far as social media is concerned, that has pluses and minuses. The major plus is the first one that I mentioned there, a massive and fast direct customer feedback. This is giving us a potential of knowing what the customer wants and needs and how he thinks about your product that was not there ever before. It is fast, it is direct, it is massive. This voice of the customer, there have never been more possibilities to capture that much more accurately and much more detailed. The negative of it, of course, is that if the news on your product or service is bad, it also travels at light speed. So if you put a product on the market that gets very negative comments or unsatisfied customers, one might say that within seconds the world will know. So you'd better not make too many mistakes. The second issue, reduced product lifecycle time, is of course going on today. We all know that this has been going on for a long time. It will continue. It will continue to increase in speed, and that has several consequences. You can use it as a distinguishing feature. Time to market becomes even more important than it was before. But from a quality point of view, if a product has a short life cycle, there's a very limited time to improve on it because it will only be on the market for a short time before it will be replaced by a new and better alternative. That is a serious consequence for quality management. You will have to look at things at fast redesigns, adaptive designs, agile design, meaning that you put on the market a minimum viable product that gets comments from the market that you can capture through social media that allows you to quickly adapt, tune it to customer satisfaction. But of course, it's all fast, so it means quick and good. As a result, you will need a highly integrated design process, and I'll come back to that later on when we talk about right first time issues on quality. So you need a highly integrated design process, and actually a design process that goes beyond the boundaries of your organization. Typically with suppliers, but that is something that is done very often already today, but also, and this is rather new, designed together with customers, because you get so much customer input that you can use your customers as a part of your design team, so to speak. And the last element is intelligent automation. And this again will have a major impact in my view. And when we talk about intelligent automation, we could also think about artificial intelligence, of course, and self-learning and deep learning systems, all these rather complicated issues that currently exist within systems. But the critical element is that we will go from an automated production to an automated control. Today, automation is very much focused on the actual making of the part. And one could say that a machine operator today is not really very much involved anymore in making the part. The real physical work of making the part has been taken over by machines. However, the next step would be that not only the productivity is machine defined, but also the quality becomes more and more machine defined, as the control function that the operator currently does might also be taken over by intelligent automated machines. And there's this ultimate view of the factory of the future. I think many people may already have heard that, but the factory of the future will have two employees, a man and his dog. The man is there to feed the dog. The dog is there to make sure that the man doesn't touch the machine. Now, this is not going to happen overnight, but in the long term, this is the direction it's going. Much more machine intelligence. Now, what are the consequences for quality management? I already mentioned some of them, and I will divide quality management into the very simple statement, right first time, right every time. That's something that, again, we all know, and it's a very nice definition, actually, of quality and quality management. Now, in the right first time issue, we're looking at typically design quality, of course. There we will have to go more from reactive to proactive. I'll explain a little more about that later. And basically from correction to prevention. This is not new to us. Ever since I've been in quality, and this is for about 35 years, I hear people say we need to be more preventive and less corrective. But I have to say in many, many organizations we haven't reached this today, but the pressure will get higher to do that. So that's right first time. And from a point of view of right every time, as I just said, we go from operator control to machine control. And that'll mean that we will need to focus on about 100% machine availability. And for the people familiar with the term, an overall equipment efficiency, or OEE, that has to be maximized, meaning we need machines that operate all the time at design speed with zero defects. Now, how good are we doing currently as quality and as quality functions in relation to right first time, right every time, and what are the major issues to be aware of? Personally, I don't think we are doing very well from a point of view of right first time. I think we underestimate still the importance of design quality, and we're not spending enough attention to it. And one of the reasons why I say that is that very recently ASQ did a study, and the study was directed at the financial impact of quality management. How does quality influence the bottom line, so to speak? And there were many questions on these financial issues. But the most interesting questions, I thought, were the questions on what is quality currently doing. And one of the questions was asking to the quality people in organizations, the programs that you run, do they impact different areas in a high way? How important are your programs for certain areas of the organizations? And you had a whole list of areas like human resources, research and development, logistics, etc., etc. Now, quality people said that of the programs they ran, 60% have a high impact on operations, but only 27% have a high impact on research and development. So we are mainly focusing our efforts on operations, right every time, I would say, not directly on research and development right first time. Another example is I googled DMAIC versus Design for Six Sigma for the people that are familiar with Six Sigma. Are we working on correcting problems and problem-solving methodology like DMAIC? Or are we more focusing on design for Six Sigma? Well, if you look at that, this gives a ratio of about 3. If you look at publications you find on these issues. And finally, the ones that are familiar with Taguchi quality engineering, Taguchi always focuses on offline quality control and how much it is to be preferred over online quality control. But if you read case studies from people having used Taguchi, 80% of them are on correcting problems. And basically, I think we as quality professionals should apply the tools that we know, like Pareto. 80% of everything is defined by the design of a product. 80% of the cost, 80% of the sustainability, 80% of customer satisfaction, 80% of everything is defined by the design of the product. So that means if you are focusing on the right things for quality, that 80% of your people in the quality department should be focusing on improving the quality of the design. This is not what I see very often within the companies that I consult. So we really need to look at a shift in that direction. So, what are tools with the future if we want to do it right first time? Anything that captures the voice of the customer correctly. This is actually doing the right things. As you know, another definition could be doing things right and doing the right things. Well, doing the right things, of course. What do customers expect? What do they want? How do they feel about your product? What is the experience? Use the Internet of Things to get performance data from your product, and later on we'll see also from your processes. Turn big data into useful information, and use information to become proactive and as an input to design improvement and future design. The point is that the new things we have, the big data, the Internet of Things, the connectivity, as I already said, offer unbelievable potential to do this much better than we ever did this before. So it is important to look at what are the possibilities of all these systems and how can we use them to get a better idea of customer expectations, customer experiences. You don't have to be a data analyst. You'll never be a better data analyst than the data analysts, but you need to know what these things can bring to us. Proactively influence customer experience. I'll give you an example. It's an example from a Belgian company, and this is their very recent new headquarters, and the company is called Barco. Now, I'd be surprised if people in the audience would know anything about Barco. They are actually the world leader in digital movie projection. 52% of all movies throughout the world that are digitally projected in movie theaters are projected on a Barco projector. So they're big within the world that they're operating in. And I'll give you an example of how they see connectivity, Internet of Things, towards quality and customer satisfaction. They monitor, because of the possibility of connectivity and Internet of Things, they monitor the behavior of every individual high-end projector. And they have a really good reporting system that brings them information by exception. Very interesting in communication. People only need to know what they need to know. We have way too much information these days, and we give people way too much information to be communicating effectively. So they do that very well. They have these exception reports. And the idea of them is not to deal with customer complaints, but to avoid customer complaints. And I'll give you an example that they use. One of the things they monitor is the start of projection according to the software-defined start of projection. And when they have a deviation of over 1 second, that will generate a report of an out of the normality condition. And of course, no customer in a movie theater will ever complain about the fact that the movie started 1 second too late. They wouldn't even know when the movie is supposed to start within a couple of minutes. So this will never ever be a problem. However, they get a report, they will study it, they will see how they can deal with it, they will update the software, send it through the projector, and get it corrected. And if it is something that is generic, they'll get all their movie projectors of that type corrected. So again, they avoid customer complaints. They don't deal with them. They actually do other things with that. They measure the environmental temperature that is present where the projector is standing. And if this is above the required conditions, they will send a message to their customer telling the customer, you are operating my machine at too high temperature. You need to do something about this, because otherwise the lifetime of your machine will go down, and you obviously also lose the warranty that is on that machine, because you're not using it the way you are supposed to use it. This is what I mean with proactive thinking. So again, other tools of the future, anything that turns the voice of the customer into design goals, like quality function deployment, still very much underutilized. Integrated design is another thing that I already mentioned, meaning design with customers and suppliers. You'll have terms that are typical from software, agile design, Scrum, Sprint, continuously updating, improving, tuning to shifting customer expectation. Do that very quickly on features that seem interesting for the customer. Important aspect with that is to be able to do that and to launch the new design or the new software with little errors. Think about integrated fast testing. And if you want to integrate fast testing, you will need quality knowledge within the development team and not next to it. So the integration is not just outside to customers and suppliers, but also inside to integrate within your design process quality engineers that are present in the design area. Another issue, design functional solutions and not products. Think about TRIS, or the theory of inventive problem solving. Very useful tool, again, underutilized. A customer is looking for a solution, not necessarily a product. And obviously never make the same design mistake twice. So you need very good lessons learned systems, designed for X systems so that you don't make mistakes on them. Think about intelligent automation also in design, computer-aided design. You will see that like the operator doesn't make the part, the designer will not design the detailed part anymore. The goal, the job of the designer will be to define the shifting design targets to meet customer expectations. And the machine, the computer, will probably make the detailed design in the end. Now, write every time, current state, look at that. We're very good at control tools. We're much more active within write every time, actually, as a quality profession. Some control tools are mandated by customers, like SPC, for instance. That could become a problem in the sense that we may not be able to apply SPC anymore in many conditions. Like if we have extremely low defect levels, it's difficult to guarantee them with statistical methods alone. What if we go to lot sizes of 1? Think about 3D printing. Think about needing new shoes, looking at a website, selecting a nice shoe, then taking a 3D image of your feet with your smartphone, sending it through, getting a file back, and then printing the shoe on your 3D printer next to you. That's not going to happen pretty quickly, but still, it are the sort of things that will become able. We're good at root cause analysis and complaint handling, but as I already said, with very short product lifetimes, you have you will have short periods that allow you to handle complaints, and actually preventing them will be much, much more important. And even in typical areas like total productive maintenance, which will become more important as machines will determine more, even there you can go more in a direction of prevention than using it purely in production. I'll give you a little example of that. So what does that mean in a future state? If there's no operator or much less operators, the machine state will have to be monitored automatically, which will lead to built-in zero defects devices, actually in addition to or replacing tools like SPC. And again, as I said, prevent complaints, be proactive. Now what I mean with proactive is, I guess, best explained with healthcare of the future. Today, when you are ill, you go to the doctor. That's corrective. Some people have a preventive scheme to the doctor every now and then. They go for a checkup. But the real future will be that thanks to all sorts of sensors, the doctor will call you and tell you, we just noticed some deviations of your blood values, so you need to come in. It's that sort of proactivity that we need to think about. In the same way, you could see that the maintenance of the future, which will be important because of the machine importance, will become much more conditioned than it is today. Now, from a right every time future state, another aspect that I will only touch briefly is culture, because of course culture and quality culture, that deserves a presentation on its own, but it is something that will stay very important at the organizational level. So tools with the future, everything that prevents errors like Poka-yoke, or if the error occurred anyway, automatic visual inspection devices. Anything that shifts control from output to inputs, again from a preventive point of view. And thinking of total productive maintenance, turning it into an offline TPM. Now I'll show you a couple of slides to indicate what sort of things you could do. And I talk about offline TPM because this could seem strange to many people. But I can only touch this briefly. Anybody who wants more information on that can contact me. I will send you a presentation that I gave at the World Conference some years ago specifically on this topic. But the idea of it is the following. When we design a process, when we design a process, and we go through the overall flow chart of eventually operating it, the idea would be that before we ever start running the process, we have everything ready to maximize the overall equipment efficiency. And to do that, we need to know which machine component conditions are critical to achieve fault-free, maximum available at design speed operating machines. And this we want to finish during a development installation phase in cooperation with the machine supplier. Again, also in process design, we need to work on integrated design. The idea is to define the required maintenance to keep components in optimum or non-optimum conditions. And once we have defined that, you will create a completely condition-based system that again will warn you when signals are out of control and need intervention. One of the tools used for that is an X-matrix. In the presentation I talked about, I used a coral reef aquarium to show how an X-matrix, for instance, works. And the idea is to link component conditions that you see here eventually to errors, and to say what state the conditions need to have to avoid these errors from occurring. And again, as I said, working proactively. Okay, let's come to some conclusions. I think that if we think of quality in the future and quality tools for the future, the survival will be with the smartest. And if we look at the right first time, and we think about big data issues, it is not going to be the company with the biggest big data that's going to be the winner. It is going to be the company that uses big data in the most sensible way. That means the company that creates reliable big data. And that's something that quality can play a major part in. We know about data quality and reliability of data. It means about getting the right big data so that the questions that we need answered, from whether it is from our machines or whether it is from our customer behavior, can be answered by the data that we generated. Again, something that quality can play a major part in. The willingness to rethink the business from a functional requirement point of view will also be very important. And I refer to a tool like TRIS. And I think there we talk about creativity, innovation, looking at things in a different way. And of course, using an integrated product development with quality as part of the development team, and with quality actually as being much more active within the development area. As far as right every time is concerned, replace historic tools by tools that are more suited for today's environment. I think the importance of SPC will come down in time. We'll need to look much more at Poka-yoke elements, focus on proactive control in product design, in process operation. And one thing we also need to work on is to bring quality knowledge to the business processes and not just to the operations. Because if we talk about the quality culture, that is something that's going to have to be embedded in the entire organization. And I think we still have some work to do on that aspect. So, on a more practical, personal point of view, what would I advise is to try and increase your knowledge on design tools, on quality improvement design tools, and try and shift already today more of your efforts towards design. Learn about the possibilities of digitization and intelligent automation. How can this help us in generating better quality? And I think the possibilities are huge, so we shouldn't see this as a threat. Introduce knowledge on culture, customer behavior, and teams. But on that aspect, I said I won't say too much because there's not enough time to talk a lot about quality culture. But on that aspect, there is one thing I want to point out, and that is that we need to be careful when we talk about culture, because this is more difficult, I think, than we generally think it is. There are people, and they're called anthropologists, and they go to university for 4 years to learn about what culture is about, what culture is, how to study culture. And I think it would be nice to have some more of that knowledge within our organization. Not even necessarily within the quality department, but at least within the organization. Because yes, culture eats process for lunch every day, but we know an awful lot about how to control processes and how to study processes. I think we need the same depth of knowledge on how to study culture. And also, of course, some more psychological knowledge within the quality department. Actually, we tend to go for the hard quality and forget a little bit about the soft quality, but then we all know that the soft quality generally is much harder than the hard one. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. I want to thank you very much for your kind attention, and for the ones that heard the first part 2 times, for your patience with me. And well, thanks again, and I think I'll need to send it over to Norwal unless he can do that for me. And I think we still have a little time for questions or comments.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Willy. I'll let you maintain control of the screen for now. I think we're good here. If you do have questions for Willy, please enter them into the chat box, and we'll take a look at them. One quick thing before we start answering questions, we noticed that a couple of folks are online but only have their first name showing. and we have multiple people registered with the same first names. So if you could please check the chat box and see if you received a chat from me asking what your last name is. Please respond so that way we make sure that you get your certificate for coming today. With that being said, looks like we have one question here, Willie. I don't know if you're able to see it.
I saw something pass about service industry, service versus production. I don't know if that is. If I go to the chat, I have Katie Castry, I think.
Okay.
Something does this apply differently to the service industries, but I don't know if that is. It doesn't really apply differently to the service industry, but of course the way it will implement you will be different. But in the same way, I mean, if you launch a service that fails, you'll be torn to pieces on social media, and you'll have the same problem. So if you generate a new service, an improved service, again, you will have to make sure that you get it right in the design phase of it, for instance. Equally, and I think actually service industries are probably more advanced from a point of view of voice of the customer through social media and that kind of thing. I think that's equally important.
Willie, do you see the question from Henderson Thomas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that there's a lot of I don't know if everybody can see the question, but the question is: the common tool used to capture the voice of the customer does not seem to provide much information. What do you walk away with when somebody selects 8 out of 10 to a question such as were you satisfied with the service provided? I think this is a good comment, and of course people have tried to create numbers out of these satisfaction surveys. You see, the problem with satisfaction surveys, especially when they're just scoring, is, as Thomas is correctly pointing out, it doesn't tell you all that much. Even the Net Promoter Score, which is just rather popular today to come up with a sort of an overall number, is just giving you a sort of a number. The advantage of big data, actually, could be to generate much more, and this sounds like counterintuitive for quality, but it could send you much more qualitative information instead of quantitative information, where in this case, the qualitative information is just how people feel about the product, how they experience the product or the service is probably much more insightful than whether they score it 7 or 8. So I do think that the possibilities we'll have to much better understand what the customer wants and how he feels about what you have delivered, we will improve a lot on that. I don't know if Thomas is happy with this comment. Hi, Norval. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Looks like we have another question here. I'll read it to you. So much to learn. Where should we connect to learn more about the most current trends?
Good question. I see it here from Emily Sargent, I see.
Right.
Yeah. Well, where should we connect? A good place to connect would probably be the World Conference in Seattle. Because there, I think there will be a lot of presentations on the future of quality and future trends. I think generally business magazines talk a lot about the things that will come. What I think, and I noticed that many people talking about big data, for instance, will say that we need to know a lot about data analysis. Now, I think I said it during this speech just half an hour ago. You will never be a better data analyst than the data analysts. And the point is, from a quality point of view, I think what we need to learn or get insight in are the possibilities of these new tools and the way these trends could influence us, rather than the technical details of how they work. I think we have to be careful that we don't fall in the trap of trying to know all the technical details of these new things, which, by the way, are sometimes pretty complex. Think about artificial intelligence and the likes. So don't get lost in the technology, I would say. I would say look at the technology, look at the possibilities of it, and how can this help me improve the quality of my organization?
Okay, I'm scrolling through here looking for other questions. Willy, are you getting any coming up on your side?
I see somebody saying thank you, which is nice. Yeah, I had another comment, I think. Yeah, Thomas Anderson replied, he actually said the same on looking to responses of what people actually say about how satisfied they are, rather than just a score on it. Sort of, we're in line on this thinking, I think. And that's it for now for me. If anybody would have any question that he wants to ask, I mean, you'll see the slides and you have my details there. I'm always open to, send me an email and we can discuss some issues, because I think this is important. And it's always interesting for me also to change ideas with other people, of course.
Yep, I'm looking here in the chat box. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through either. Looks like we have about 5 minutes left. If somebody does have a last-minute question, we can certainly take it. As we're waiting, we're just going to go ahead and remind everybody once again that our next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, February 8th. That'll be Fix Your Fights, related to conflict management. That'll be with Angela Spranger on February 8th. Looking here, I don't see any other questions coming through, Willy.
No, neither do I.
Any other comments from you?
No, not really. I hope to see many people in Seattle, of course, where this talk was about the future and quality tools, quality management in general. In Seattle, I'll more talk about the competencies and requirements and knowledge for the quality manager of the future. So it'll be more focused on the function of quality manager.
Well, maybe sometime later in the year we can have you come online and talk about what the future quality manager is going to look like.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. There was the last question that just popped up. How should Pareto be used differently?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what Thomas is meaning here, although he's saying to everyone, so I know, yeah. The point I made on Pareto was actually if if 80% of quality of a product is determined by design, quality as such should be like 80% present in design to make sure that that is good. But I don't know if the question is relating to that.
He's referring to future use.
Well, actually, I think that Pareto, being one of the most simple, basic quality tools, is the one that we should be using much, much more. I don't think the current use is good enough because, in fact, one of the areas where we're not using it very good is purely even in strategy. Are we putting the right attention to the things that are the most important to the business? I see companies spending lots of money and time on things that are really peanuts for the business, and meanwhile ignoring or even treating good customers bad because of all the efforts they put into bad customers sometimes, to put it that way. So I simply feel that Pareto should be used much more at a higher strategic level, not just in technical technical improvement projects.
Yeah, looks like Henderson's follow-up is the current use of Pareto good enough?
Yeah, well, I think that's what I was trying to
Okay.
explain, that I think it isn't, and it should be used more.
Okay. All right, well, we're about out of time for this time. We're going to go ahead, and since we doesn't appear like we have any other questions, we're going to go ahead and call it for today. I'd like to thank Willy once again for presenting for us today and for giving a second try after not having much success earlier in the month. Thanks again, Willy.
You're welcome, Norval. And the good thing, it worked out fine technically this time.
Yes, it did well this time. We had a little bit of bumps here at our end, but we got them straightened out. Thanks for everyone for coming today, and until February 8th, we hope everybody has a good rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.